So many moms feel stuck and isolated, like they've got to keep it all together and can't say how hard it really is. On Let's Get Real, we talk about the real stuff, motherhood, mental health, and everything in between, so you don't feel like you have to carry it alone anymore. Because in order to heal, we have to get real. If you're feeling overwhelmed, grab the Overwhelmed Moms Guide. It's totally free and made to help you feel like yourself again. The link is in the show notes. Let's jump in. Most moms give out compassion all day long to their kids, their partners, and their friends. But when it comes to themselves, they tend to be their own harshest critic. What if the missing piece in your healing isn't trying harder, but learning how to treat yourself with the same kindness that you show everybody else? Elizabeth Cush is a licensed therapist, coach, author, and the host of the Awaken Your Wise Woman podcast. She helps women, especially highly sensitive moms, break free from guilt, shame, and self-criticism so they can live with more compassion, confidence, and joy. Elizabeth, thank you so much for being here. I'm really excited to get to dive into this topic of self-compassion and how that shows up in motherhood. I think it's going to be really impactful. So thank you for being here.
I'm so happy to be here. Thanks for having me, Jena. And I very passionate about self-compassion, I would say. So I'm excited to chat with you about that too.
Awesome. Well, before we get to the heart of self-compassion, can you share a little bit about what drew you to this work and why it's so personal for you?
So I'm a therapist. I'm also soul support for highly sensitive women, and I'm also a mom. So I have 3 grown children, and I went back to school later in life to become a therapist, and through that process really recognized how easy it was for me to be really harsh and kind of unkind to myself around parenting, around just humanness, right? And as I learned more about self-compassion, realizing how often it was really easy to talk to myself unkindly when I wouldn't really ever have done that. I wouldn't have shared those same thoughts or feelings about that, those same statements to other people, right? And so as I learned more about it and began to practice it, it has just helped me be a kinder, more compassionate person in general towards myself and others. But I think especially as parents, it's really easy to be hard on ourselves for not being perfect or not raising our kids exactly the right way, or I don't know. It's just easy to find fault. And I feel like one of the most important pieces I work on with my clients is helping them find that compassion for themselves that they often have for others.
So powerful. And I am excited to hear further as we get into the interview, just even some stories of what that looks like as far as the transformation of somebody getting to experience that, going from like the harsh critic to really getting to practice this new way of showing ourselves compassion. But before we dive into that, I would love it if you could just explain a little bit further of what self-compassion actually is, because I know it can be easy to think, oh, that's just being nice to myself. But if you could explain a little bit further what this looks like and what it is, that would be really helpful.
Sure. So Kristen Neff has been a real proponent in through her books and her research around self-compassion. And what they found is that it sort of comprises of 3 main things. One is mindfulness. So mindful awareness of how you do speak to yourself. So bringing a mindful awareness to when does that inner critic show up and what is it saying to me and what is the tone and how am I treating myself? And then a recognition that through common humanity, we're all struggling with something. Everybody struggles. And so recognizing that just because I'm struggling doesn't make me a bad person, that we're not perfect. We're not perfect humans, right? We're going to make mistakes. We're going to have struggle. And then thirdly is that really kinder relationship with yourself. So learning to speak to yourself in a kinder way. And it doesn't mean we're giving ourselves a pass for if we do make mistakes. It means that we're meeting ourselves in that mistake with kindness, right? So say, for instance, I yell at my kids and probably for something maybe they weren't doing intentionally to be harmful or hurtful, but I'm feeling stressed. And so I scream at my kids and then later feel horrible about it. I might meet myself with criticism, like I'm such a bad mom. I don't know how to do this. I'm ruining my children. Instead, meeting yourself with, that was really hard. I was feeling really stressed. I didn't treat them the way I would like to. I really wasn't my best self. And can I meet myself there? That was really hard. That was a hard moment. And I'm going to work to do it differently next time because I'm bringing awareness to a way that I behave that I'm maybe not really happy with, but that I want to do better. So just if that makes sense.
It does. I'm just glad that you painted that picture. The thing that stood out to me was when you said that it doesn't mean you kind of gloss over what if I yelled at my kids. It's, oh, well, just pretend that didn't happen or excuse it away. It's a whole different approach. And so I'm curious with these comparisons between the inner critic, right? And then having self-compassion. There are these two ways that we can talk to ourselves primarily.
Yeah.
And why do you think that we so often, there's something that happens or this tendency that gets built in us to lean towards the critic, where we actually have to be so intentional to implement and really be intentional to say, okay, I'm going to move towards self-compassion because this has become a default to criticize myself, shame myself, judge myself. So why do you think that is?
I think there's a lot of reasons for that, but one is, I think culturally, we think meeting mistakes with a hammer versus a feather or whatever, right? Like if we're harsh, then that's what's going to make change. That, if we are really strict and, beat ourselves up, then that's what's going to make us do things differently. I think also we are prone to see the negative. That's just our bias as humans. Like, we hold on to the negative versus the positive. And so it's easier to see the parts of ourselves that maybe we don't love or that aren't quite perfect. I think too that if we were met with criticism as a way of managing us as a kid, those voices can kind of stay with us. So maybe there was whether it was a coach or a parent who was super critical of us, sometimes we can internalize those voices as parts of ourselves. So I think it's a combination of things, but really what's been shown is that criticism doesn't really work to motivate, and that we're more likely to change when met with compassion, a reality of compassion, right? Yeah, maybe I didn't do things perfectly and I'm striving to do better.
It's making me think of this combination. Compassion is the combination of grace and truth together. Whereas criticism is, the harshness can come from just the truth, but there's not the grace of saying, but you're human too. And of course this would happen. So I don't know, that's really standing out to me of what is needed and how we can have both in compassion. It's yes, we can speak the truth of the situation, but we also need with that heavy doses of grace. And that can help move us through, and it can help move us out of getting stuck in shame, which then perpetuates the cycle. And then we do it again, and then we beat ourselves up again. And we're like, so we don't actually progress and get better at this. It's like, why do I keep doing the same things? Well, reality is like we will keep making mistakes. We'll probably have those same things that we do, but if we I would think. Like if we practice more compassion, it'll get less and less. Like it's kind of the shorter rebound time. Like, okay, I didn't stay in that as long, or it didn't react as quickly, or you know what I mean? So you can see these measures of progress.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, I think that's true. And I think what we know now about our brains, that like we can actually create new neural pathways in our brain, to the more we're practicing meeting ourselves with that grace and compassion, the more likelihood is the next time we'll say, oh, maybe that little critical voice will show up briefly. And then you're like, oh, yeah, okay, I hear that. And I really am working toward being kinder to myself in these moments when I'm really struggling.
Yes. So good. In your work with women, and women, particularly moms, what do you tend to see can hold them back from being able to really give themselves that compassion?
Yeah. Oh, well, because I think there's so much culturally around what it means to be a good mom, a good parent, that it can be, between social media, between just advertising, what we see in the media, that if we're not meeting those standards, which often are difficult to attain, then it can be easy to then turn on ourselves to say we're not doing a good job. What I see in my clients is often this expectation of perfection. So a lot of my clients come to me with anxiety, but perfectionist and perfectionism traits, where they've really they strive hard to do everything right. So there isn't that backlash of judgment, whether from outside themselves or within. And I think part of my job is to help them recognize that none of us are perfect, right? That we're all working hard to do the best that we can. And I think one of the things that has helped really my clients sort of see the impact of their own self-critical part is that, like, I'll ask if I hear some of that self-criticism coming through in a session, to just pause for a moment and say, like, would you, I just want you to say that back to me. And would you ever say that to a good friend? Would you ever say that to your child? Would you ever say that to your pet, right? Some of these hard, you're such an idiot. You're so stupid. Whatever it is that you're saying to yourself. And then sort of this realization of like, no, I would never talk to anybody else the way I talk to myself. And that's a huge awareness. Like, why is it okay to be so terrible to yourself when you would never be that way to others?
Yeah, that's so good. It's helpful to have someone bring these things to light, to bring really what I had heard you say earlier was this awareness piece is huge as a massive first step, right? And being able to even recognize and not have it be like, because oftentimes we'll feel these feelings, we'll feel bad about ourselves, we don't even have the words for it necessarily, but we feel shame or guilt and all those. But we don't realize how those are tied to the messages and the critical voice that said something which was a default at that point. Exactly. So then getting to have that level of awareness, it's like, oh, okay, that's the first huge step to create the change. And I love that your clients get to work with you and practicing this, expressing it and exploring it out loud and being like, what if saying it out loud? And then being like, would I ever tell my child that? Would I ever tell my friend that? Absolutely not. Oh, okay. Yeah. And this is serious stuff. Like, it's important to recognize. And I think it's helpful to hear what you're saying too, as far as this perfectionistic tendency. Mm-hmm. Oh my gosh, that has been a really, really rough one for myself. And I'm seeing how, as I've reflected back growing up, that was such a way of me trying to protect myself, to stay safe. And I didn't realize it's like, oh, if I can just be perfect enough, and then if I make a mistake, there's really no room for mistakes. If I make a mistake, I need to beat myself up and shame myself so that doesn't happen again, so I stay safe, so I can maintain this relationship. It just is like a whole series of things. So I'm so glad that you were able to speak to that.
Yeah. And I think the idea that this is a very protective mechanism, right? That it's so not to shame the inner critic either, right? To say, okay, I hear that you are trying to protect me and keep me safe and make it so I don't feel bad if I make mistakes. And yet I'm working to be kinder to myself around when I don't always get it right.
Yes. Oh my gosh. That is big too, because I was sharing earlier before we started recording that in therapy, I've been learning about internal family systems, and that's something that you're trained in, and you teach your clients and walk them through. And so the big thing that I've been learning in that is what you just said. It's not to shame the inner critic, which is what I was doing. And then it wasn't helping. It was almost like that got bigger and was like taking up more space to defend and protect.
Right.
And so it's like my therapist, as she has led me in this, she's like, okay, talking to the critical part, to that critic, and having some compassion on the critic, and just being able to say, hey, actually, thank you. I see that you have actually been doing your job to try and protect and keep me safe. So thank you for doing that. It's just no longer helpful in this situation. And just, it's been so transformative to talk that way, and then get to see that part, the critical part, start to soften and shift and transform. So if you could just share, even in your work with clients as you've done IFS, and especially in this critical part, what have you noticed, whether it's for yourself or your clients, as this shift starts to happen?
Well, I think it just opens up so much more space within us. As you said, if we're trying to shut down the critic, shut up, go away, I don't want to hear you anymore, or whatever it is, it just keeps us in that, almost that fight with that critic, right? The fight or flight, and a very activated state. Where if we can soften, create some space, and hear from the critic, like why it feels it's so important to protect you in this way. Often it's based on something from our past, as you said, something from childhood, maybe, where you did need to be really like a people pleaser or a perfectionist in order to stay emotionally safe, hopefully not physically safe too, but perhaps, right, to be safe in that environment as a child. The inner critic learned it had to be extreme, right, to keep you in line, and to then be able to share, like sort of creating the space to share with that part of you that this is my life now, right? This is where I am. This is how old I am. This is how I'm navigating the world today. And I've seen it with clients where they've been able to really, it just takes you out of that constant fight within. And as the compassion builds for them, for themselves, they just become more kinder and compassionate out in the world as well. But I just see just this sort of growth of self-trust, of trusting intuition, of really being able to meet all their parts, even the more challenging ones, more extreme ones, with more kindness, which just opens up so much more understanding within, and just a greater sense of self.
And I'm picturing more peace internally and externally, where there's not this fight going on internally, this battling. But that's so neat. It's encouraging to hear what you're sharing, and just really the transformation that can happen. Just truly how powerful this is, this self-compassion, and learning it's a practice.
Yes.
And learning what it actually looks like, what this actually is. So I know I brought up multiple times this guilt and shame. So that's something that many most of us carry, and many moms especially. Where do you think those feelings usually come from?
Boy, often it is from past traumas that we have carried a lot of guilt and shame for how we responded to situations as a kid, right? And I can speak for myself. There was a time that as a teenager, because of my history of trauma and how my parents handled it, that I turned to substances like alcohol or mostly pot, or marijuana or whatever. And there was a time that I looked back on that teenage part of me and looked back on myself at that time with a lot of shame. How did I let things get out of hand? Or why wasn't I able to better control myself, whatever it was? But the reality was I was just trying to do the best that I could with all the feelings that were present in my teenage self, and I just didn't know how to handle them because my parents and I didn't have role models in how to do that. It wasn't met with that same compassion, right?
Yes.
And so I have learned to see that younger part of me as like she was doing the best that she could with what she had, and she found ways to cope, really, to stop feeling, because that was easier than to feel all the things she was feeling without any outlet.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Such a great example. Yeah. And it's so relevant because I don't think we realize how deeply tied the shame and guilt gets tied back to these parts of our story. And then that's where the critic can come in even further and just continue to beat ourselves down. And it's helpful to hear that and just what that looks like of having some more understanding as you peel back the layers and understand your own story and what was happening at that time, to be like, well, this actually makes sense. And looking at your age and looking at the situation, of course, like the pain was too great and there wasn't anyone to meet you in it. And you needed some release from all that you were carrying. So that's really, really helpful to hear. And I resonate with that a lot personally. What do you think is the impact on our kids when we parent out of shame or self-criticism?
Well, in many ways, we're modeling what we don't want them to take on, right? I can imagine probably my kids probably heard me saying, oh my gosh, I'm such an idiot, or oh, I'm so stupid, or I was caught in ruminating over a mistake that I made. My kids were pretty sensitive. They probably were picking up on that energy as well, right? Like picking up on how distressed I was around a situation that I felt was my fault, that somehow I could have controlled or done things differently. And I think without intending to, I probably passed along a lot of anxiety to my kids too, and a feeling of needing to control their environment in a way that isn't really possible, right? There's so much beyond our control. But I think that when we carry a lot of shame, it does, I think that energy does sort of bleed out into the world. And so it's it's definitely, I think our kids pick up on it. And I'm not saying that to say shame on you for feeling shame or shame on you for carrying that guilt. But again, like you said, the awareness is the first step. If I can be more aware of how I treat myself, what I say to myself, how I interact with me, that's going to model for them. If I can shift that, I can help them then model a behavior that's more compassionate, a relationship with themselves that's kinder. And I just want to, for a long time, I felt as a parent that I had done damage to my kids because I wasn't healed enough as a parent when I started, right? When my first child was born. But what I've come to realize through my own therapy and through working with other clients, and doing work myself, is that I can create change today with my adult kids, or even when my kids were teenagers, by approaching things differently, which then helps them see that change in me, which goes a long way towards healing, right? Again, I was doing the best that I could with what I had at the time. So now I can do things differently, right? I can see that young mom with a lot of compassion for how hard it was. And I can create change and even own the work that I'm doing now with them to say, hey, I recognize maybe I didn't always show up in a way I would have liked to, but I am going to start doing that today or from here on.
It's never too late, which is huge. And I'm really glad that you've spoken to this, because I think that's a comment. It can be very discouraging where you're like, okay, well, if someone didn't start it until their kids were adults, right? Like didn't start the process of pursuing healing, or if they were, wrapped up in addiction of some kind and didn't start recovering from that until their kids were grown. There can be so much remorse, just feeling like regret and feeling like it's too late or what's the point. But I love what you're sharing of how it really is never too late, because at every stage, it's actually very encouraging, even for your kids, to see, wow, change is possible. No, for the rest of my life, it's possible. Healing is possible. And it's meant to be a journey for the rest of my life. There will always be these new areas that are uncovered for me to heal and grow in and all of that. So I'm so, so glad that you did speak to that. Otherwise, it can just feel very discouraging.
Yeah, and overwhelming, right?
And
like, how do I fix all this when it's to me, it's really like no parent is perfect. It's impossible, right?
Yeah.
We can't be perfect parents. And so, sure, will our kids grow up with some struggle because we were not the perfect parent? Of course. And we're there to be the guide as well as guide them to whatever help they might need if, there is some struggle along the way.
That's so good. It's very hopeful. So I appreciate you sharing that.
Yeah.
What difference have you seen when moms begin to lead for compassion first? How have you seen that show up for themselves and with their kids, their families, and their everyday life?
Yeah. Well, I see as my clients sort of progress out of this constant sort of monitoring of themselves into just allowing themselves to be. And a lot of the shift comes in decreased anxiety, decreased depression, sort of mental health symptoms. But I also just see sort of a blossoming the person, right? That they're now able to kind of be in the world in a more human and balanced way, because that critic that, if you think about living with a fire drill in your head, right? You're doing it wrong. This is never right. You can't get it right. Like, that's a really hard place to enter the world and to be your most aligned self, right?
Yes.
And so I have seen, better relationships in for the client in their relationship. So whether it's with their own parents or with their spouse or whatever it might, and their kids, just more easeful living, that it just doesn't always feel like such a challenge.
And what stood out to me was how you said they can just be human, be them, like their true self, like who they actually are without all these layers of protection. And it resonates with me because this has been very much the journey that I've been on personally, and shifting away from the pressure to feel like I have to perform all the time. And that's part of this. I have to be perfect, and perfection and performing are so intertwined, right? Well, if I'm going to try to be perfect, it is a performance, because I can't bring my true self there for fear of exposure. And if I mess up and make a mistake, I'm so vulnerable. And so it's almost like having so many scripts in place and like, oh, this is what I say when this happens, or this is pre-planning these things, which keeps me in the doing and in this performing. And it completely robs me of to be a human, to be me. And in this process, like I've been able to talk to some close friends as I've been in this journey. And I've shared with a friend recently, I was like, man, okay, the thing that's been getting less and less for me as I'm making these mistakes is the voice that used to be so loud was, what's wrong with you? Like, what's wrong with me? What's wrong with me? What's wrong with me? There's something wrong just for making a mistake. And I was telling her, I'm like, it's so neat because that's become so quiet. It will come up sometimes, but it's like a whisper in the back of my head, but it's no longer the dominating voice. And it really has helped to soften these crazy, unrealistic expectations I've had. And just what you're saying is practicing, really getting to experience self-compassion in this sense of, oh, actually, I can be curious, where I'm like, well, yeah, like this happened because of X, Y, and Z. Of course, I would react like this, of course.
Right.
And I'm like, oh my gosh, what a difference. You know, and then I'm actually sharing it with someone where I'm not hiding. I'm like, oh my gosh, I messed up. I'm not perfect. I can't tell anybody. I have to perform. And I'm like, wow, to be able to create more freedom to be and find other people who are safe that I can show up as me. It's so transformative. So it's been a game changer. So anyways, I just am sharing that because it's like all of what you're saying, like, oh, I'm seeing these things play out and these dots keep getting more and more connected. So yeah.
I love that. I love that. I love, to me, that piece that you brought, the curiosity, is such an important part of it, because shame and guilt isn't curious, right? It's just like, you're wrong, you're a bad person, versus like, I wonder what was happening for me when I got really angry, or I don't know, had too much to drink, or whatever it is, right? Like, okay, well, let's kind of look back on it. Oh, right. That person said that thing, and then I felt this certain way, and then I went down this rabbit hole, and then here I am. Oh, no wonder. Okay, well, I get it. Yeah.
Oh, it's so good, because the other ones are the critics, the shame, the guilt. It's accusatory, and it's assumption. It's really making a bunch of assumptions instead of asking questions and really getting to uncover the root of this, which then continues to create the opportunity for change.
Right,
so like, oh, so yes, it's so helpful to hear. I'm wondering if you could share, what are some small practical practices that a mom could start today to start building self-compassion into her life? Like kind of everyday little things that she could do.
Well, the first thing I always say to my clients is, again, awareness, right? I just want you to pay attention to how often you are being self-critical, how often that voice shows up, how harsh is it? You know, how is it you're speaking to yourself? And then even asking yourself, like, what would I say to a friend who is going through the same thing? How would I address them? How would I meet them in this difficult time? Would I say, you're so stupid. You're such an idiot. What's wrong with you? No, I would be like, oh, God, that sounds hard. That sounds really hard. And to offer, can you just begin to shift that dialogue for yourself from the, what's wrong with me? You're an idiot, to like, oh, this is hard. And it feels really hard. Another practice that I love is when you are struggling, for me, just putting my hands on my heart and just meeting myself there, like, yeah, okay, this has been a difficult time, or I'm not really proud of how I behaved. Okay, can I just meet myself there?
Yes.
And I think for a lot of people who have grown up with very perfectionist, performing, people-pleasing parts, it can be hard to find, you know, if you weren't met with that same compassion as a kid or in your life, it may be hard to offer those words and have it really feel like it resonates. So what I offer is like, okay, can you imagine what a good friend would say to you in those moments if you're struggling? And if that still feels really hard, if you have a pet, dogs, cats, well, cats are a little more conditional, but dogs are unconditionally loving, or even like Mother Nature or a tree, how would something that is so unconditionally with you, how would they respond to you in these moments of struggle, or your child, or whatever it is, right? If you can find the most compassionate thing in your life, what would that person or animal or thing say to you?
Yes. Oh, it's really helpful. It's only, and I love it because it's this awareness piece like you're talking about, plus this little change in the next step of an action, right? Of just, I love it. And it's several options of like, okay, how would you talk to a friend? Or if that doesn't do it for you, how would a friend talk to you? Or if not that, like a pet or something that you connect with and resonate with, that you do feel this unconditional,
Regard.
yes, exactly. That is so helpful. And it's something that doesn't have to take long. And it's like, even if you catch it one time in your day, just that is the shift that really starts the process here to cultivate more of this. Can you share a story from your work or life that really shows the change of when a woman has chosen compassion over criticism?
I was working with a client for a long time, and this is kind of a compilation of multiple clients because I can't really talk about a specific one for HIPAA and all those reasons, privacy. But so a client, for instance, who's been struggling with addiction, alcohol addiction, and really, I think addiction is one of the hardest places to meet ourselves with compassion. And so the shame, the guilt, the recrimination after a night of drinking, or when you've promised yourself you're not going to drink and you drink anyway, or use whatever substance it is. I have seen clients shift in that awareness of like, this is a struggle for me, and perhaps I didn't do what I said I was going to do. I didn't abstain. I didn't not drink. And I know how hard this is and how much I want to change. So can I be kinder to myself in this moment when maybe I'm not feeling great from a night of drinking, or maybe I woke up with a hangover. And so seeing that shift in a client's relationship with themselves around the substance to like, oh yeah, okay, well, this is an addiction and it's something I'm really working toward changing. And maybe I need more help than just myself, right? So can I reach outside myself and get the help I need? But that shift in piling on the blame and shame for a behavior you're not proud of to, oh gosh, this is really hard. And yeah, I didn't do what I had hoped, or I didn't behave the way I wanted to. And can I meet myself there? Like, yeah, I didn't do it the way I wanted to. I overdrank, but I recognize I'm really trying to change, and I'm going to work on, doing better next time, or doing it differently next time.
Yeah, that's such a great example. And because I'm thinking of, I find it interesting too, you're saying with addiction, that's one of the hardest things for people. Which, can you expand a little bit on that? Why might that be with addiction? And why it can be so hard for people to shift?
So often in my work, I see that addiction often develops when there's been a history of trauma. And that might not mean like a specific big trauma, like being abused or something like that. It could just be your parents didn't meet your emotional needs the way you needed as a kid. And so often then the person will turn to alcohol or drugs sort of to numb, right? To as I described for myself, right? To cope with the big feelings that showed up, using something to sort of cut off those feelings. But I have also seen it through people who are super sensitive, maybe highly sensitive, where they easily, or introverted, they get really overwhelmed in social situations. So alcohol becomes the buffer, right? The way I can show up easily, like, oh, I can let this cloak down and not perform, right? I can just be myself. But the reality is you're being your alcohol-induced self, not your really true self. But
Yeah.
so then a lot of shame can build up around that, but also a dependence, right? And so there is a medical dependence piece to it where your body becomes used to using that substance to manage those difficult situations or to manage your emotional overwhelm. It just gets tied into this cycle, right? Of that's hard to switch. But I think then shame and guilt jump into that cycle too, right? So that
Yeah.
you're constantly trying to do better, but you're also finding ways to shame yourself or to feel ashamed about your behavior. And it just makes it a really, really difficult circle to break.
Yes, I can see that. And in the story, the example that you gave, I was thinking of how the shame, because, right, we're talking about like shifting from criticism, self criticism to self compassion. And in this example, how the self criticism, it keeps that person in hiding and it keeps them isolated and keeps them from reaching out and seeking help. Whereas when they can shift towards self-compassion, it actually can lead them to reaching out, to asking for help and finding the solutions so they can get well, they can get better. And yeah, instead of staying stuck in this place, it moves them out of that, which is so powerful and it's so helpful to hear and just see that, what that can look like. Well, Elizabeth, as we are coming to an end here, I would just love it if you could share where people can find you, your work, as well as if you could just share the podcast that you have and all that. That'd be so helpful.
Sure. So I am a therapist licensed in Maryland and Delaware. And so you can find, which means I can see clients who are residents in those areas. And you can find my therapy page at progressioncounseling.com. I am also a soul support for highly sensitive women and just am opening up a membership for highly sensitive women. And people can find that at elizabethcushcoaching.com. Or you can search Awaken Your Wise Woman. That's the name of my podcast. And you can find me there on the podcast, wherever you listen to podcasts, but also on my website.
Amazing. Thank you. And if there is a woman who is, because I'm thinking of the sensitive woman, can you just describe that really quick, what that is? So if there is a woman listening, she's like, yeah, that's me.
Yeah. So high sensitivity is a trait that we're born with. And so it means that we are highly attuned to all sensory information. So what you feel, what you touch, we're deeply connected to emotional stuff like our own as well as others. So even noise, color, imagine going into a crowded room and just all the stimulation that's coming at you. For the average person, that's probably pretty okay. For a highly sensitive person, it can be incredibly overwhelming because you're hearing everything, you're feeling other people's feelings, you're noticing the color and the people and the environment. And so all that environmental stimuli is like turned up in all the time. And so often highly sensitive women and people need a lot of downtime. They need ways to recharge and reset because that overwhelm can leave you feeling depleted and you don't have any energy left. But it is also a very beautiful trait because we're incredibly empathetic and can love deep connection and love like the true souls meeting, like that stuff that we absolutely love and can get a lot of fulfillment out of being in nature or around animals and stuff like that. So
Yes, thank you for that. That's really helpful. And I'm thinking myself, I'm sure there's plenty of other ones. So yeah, thank you for sharing that. And I'm so glad
and people can find more at hsperson.com. The woman who's done a ton of research around it is there, and there's a lot of resources plus like a little questionnaire that you can fill out and
oh, great. I love that. Okay, that's so helpful. Well, Elizabeth, thank you so much for taking the time to be on here and sharing your expertise and story, the insights that you have, just because I know this is going to help whoever is listening and just practically how we can practice self-compassion for ourselves so we can show up better as better versions of us and for ourselves, for our kids, our families. And so thank you so much for taking the time to be here.
Thank you, Jena. I really appreciated our conversation. It was great. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Well, if this episode has encouraged you, please share it with a friend who needs the reminder that she is not alone. Thank you so much for listening, friend. I cannot wait to talk with you next time. Thanks for listening to Let's Get Real. If you've been feeling stretched thin, stuck in survival mode, or like you've lost yourself in motherhood, I made something just for you. It's called the Overwhelmed Mom's Guide, and it's totally free. Inside, I walk you through simple steps to help you reconnect with who you are, find a bit more breathing room in your day, and start to feel like you again. You can grab it now. Just click the link in the show notes. You don't have to keep doing this alone. Let's take the next step together.